The restaurant smelled faintly of expensive candles and polished wood, a place where laughter and clinking glasses usually carried an air of sophistication. But tonight, sophistication felt suffocating. I sat at the long glossy table, my hands neatly folded on my lap, trying to steady the nervous flutter in my chest. The soft golden lights reflected off the crystal glasses, making them sparkle in a way that only seemed to mock me. Across from me, my mother's eyes were sharp and calculating, scanning the table with that familiar sense of judgment that had followed me since childhood. My brother, seated at her right, leaned back casually in his chair, one hand resting on the table, the other holding a glass of red wine. His smile was effortless, confident, the kind that always seemed to make everyone else feel small in comparison. Tonight, that smile felt like a knife pressed gently against my chest. Honestly, my mother began, her voice calm but cutting. I just don't understand why you haven't made something of yourself yet. I mean, look at your brother. A penthouse in the city, a successful career in you. She let the word hang in the air, heavy and scornful. You're still renting, aren't you? I felt my stomach twist, my face heating up as the words sank in. The family across the table chuckled, some of them politely, some not so politely. Each laugh was a tiny hammer driving into my self-esteem, and I struggled to swallow the lump in my throat. I tried to smile, tried to nod as if it didn't hurt, but the effort felt hollow. "Mom, please," my brother interjected lightly, almost teasingly. "Don't be too hard on them. We all have our paths, right?" His voice was smooth, comforting to everyone else, but to me it felt like another layer of betrayal. Path. My path had been difficult, painstaking, filled with sacrifices he couldn't even imagine. And yet, here he was, casually basking in praise for something I had indirectly supported him in all along. I lowered my gaze to my plate, pretending to examine the perfectly arranged food. Every bite seemed tasteless. I could hear the faint clinking of silverware, the soft hum of background conversation, but it all felt distant, almost irrelevant. My mind was racing, replaying years of quiet effort, long nights, careful budgeting, personal sacrifices, all of it unnoticed, invisible, and unappreciated. And yet, tonight, it wasn't just invisibility. It was humiliation, a humiliation served to me neatly on a silver platter in front of the very people who should have known better. "You know," my mother continued, her tone dripping with that sickly sweet mixture of superiority and disappointment, "I just wish you'd aim higher. Why settle for mediocrity when your brother," she paused, giving him a meaningful glance, "is living the life we always dreamed of for our children?" The laughter at the table swelled again. My brother chuckled softly, polite and amused, clearly enjoying the performance at my expense. I wanted to say something, to defend myself, to explain the effort, the planning, the sacrifices, but the words stuck in my throat. My chest felt heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. But even as the humiliation sank in, a small, steady flame began to flicker inside me. I didn't know how or when, but I knew I had a truth they weren't aware of, a truth that could turn this evening upside down. For now, I kept it buried, hidden behind calm eyes and a polite smile, while the laughter continued to echo around the table, oblivious to the storm quietly gathering within me. Tonight, I was the target of scorn, but I also carried a secret weapon. And soon, they would see that I had been the one holding the reins all along. As the dinner continued, I found myself staring at my glass, tracing the condensation with my fingertip, while my mind drifted into memories I had buried for years. The laughter at the table still rang in my ears, but it began to fade as I replayed the truth they would never guess. My brother, the golden boy everyone adored, wasn't the independent success they imagined. Not fully. The penthouse, the lavish lifestyle, the effortless charm he paraded around, all of it had a secret foundation, one they would never expect. It wasn't that I had set out to be invisible. I had tried, in my own quiet way, to build something meaningful for myself. Night after night I worked tirelessly, saving, planning, and taking risks that nobody knew about. And then, when the opportunity came to help my brother secure his dream apartment, the penthouse he flaunted so effortlessly, I had done it. I had lent him the money, managed the lease, and even handled the renovations quietly so no one would suspect. It wasn't about recognition, it was about family. Or at least, that had been the plan. But tonight, in the harsh glow of the chandelier, I realized just how ungrateful and oblivious they all had been. My mother, in particular, had no idea of the effort, the sacrifices, the late nights spent balancing budgets and negotiating terms, all to make her golden child shine brighter. She had never paused to think that perhaps her scornful words might have landed on the shoulders of someone who had quietly carried her favorite son's dreams for years. And my brother, I felt a pang of bitterness as I thought of him. He had always been charming, effortless, able to turn every glance, every word, every smile into admiration. But the truth was, without me, without the penthouse, his carefully curated image of success would crumble like sand through fingers. He didn't know, or maybe he did and simply didn't care, that behind every shiny surface, every cocktail party, every toast in his honor, I had been the invisible architect of his lifestyle. The memory of our last conversation in the apartment came unbidden. I had reminded him gently that rent was due, that the lease required responsibility. He had smiled, that same infuriating smile, and brushed it off as if the money came from some magical, endless source. At the time, I had laughed along, tolerating his arrogance because family meant compromise. But tonight, as I listened to my mother belittle me in front of everyone, I felt that old laughter sour in my throat. It wasn't just anger. It was a quiet, simmering disappointment, the kind that weighs heavily in your chest because it's wrapped in years of patience and hope. I realized I wasn't upset merely because they humiliated me. I was upset because they never saw me. The countless nights I had sacrificed, the efforts I had poured into supporting someone else's dream, had gone unnoticed. And for what? For their admiration of a facade. But as the heat of embarrassment and frustration mingled, something else began to grow, a careful, controlled resolve. This wasn't just about setting the record straight. This was about revealing a truth so undeniable, so elegantly poetic, that no laughter could ever undo it. The knowledge that I held the power behind the image, the truth of who had truly built the life they were celebrating, gave me a strange sense of calm. I finished my drink slowly, letting the silence between sips anchor me. My mother's words, my brother's confident gestures, the laughter at the table, it all became background noise. I was no longer the embarrassed target. I was the one holding a secret that could quietly, irrevocably turn the tables. And I knew, with a patience honed by years of invisibility, that the right moment would come. When it did, no one would be able to deny it. The roles would reverse, the laughter would vanish, and I would finally stand, not in the shadow of their illusions, but in the undeniable truth of what I had built and what they had taken for granted. For now I waited, letting the fire inside me grow hotter with each passing moment, until the perfect time to reveal everything arrived. The air at the table had grown heavier, as if the chandeliers themselves were pressing down on us. My mother continued to speak, her tone dripping with self-satisfaction, praising my brother as though the world owed him applause for merely existing. Each word was another pinprick in my chest, but this time, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The years of quiet effort, the secret sacrifices, the late nights spent building the very lifestyle everyone admired in him, all of it had led to this moment. I pushed my chair back slightly and leaned forward, letting my hands rest lightly on the table. "Mom," I said, my voice steady, almost gentle, though it carried the weight of what I was about to reveal. "You've been so focused on comparing us, but there's something you don't know." Her head tilted, a flicker of curiosity crossing her face. My brother, sensing the shift, raised an eyebrow but stayed silent, his smile still in place but not quite reaching his eyes. "I think it's time you understood the truth about that penthouse you've been so proud of," I continued, keeping my tone calm, almost conversational. The entire table leaned in slightly, sensing the change in atmosphere. "The one everyone thinks my brother owns." I let the words hang for a moment, watching their expressions. My mother's eyes narrowed slightly, suspicion creeping in. "Yes," she said, clearly expecting some kind of excuse, some attempt to deflect embarrassment. "Well," I took a deep breath, letting the satisfaction of the moment build slowly. "He doesn't own it. He's been renting it from me. For years." The silence was immediate. A fork clattered against a plate, and I could see the collective shock ripple across the table. My mother froze, her mouth slightly open, eyes wide with disbelief. My brother's confident smile faltered, then disappeared completely, replaced by a rigid, incredulous glare. "You what?" he asked finally, his voice tight. For once he wasn't smooth, wasn't charming, he sounded small, vulnerable, like the world had suddenly shifted beneath him. "You've been living there, enjoying every party, every compliment, every envious glance, all because I quietly made it possible," I said, my voice soft but unyielding. "And all this time you acted as if it was your own success. You never once acknowledged what it took to make that happen." My mother's face had turned pale, her hand hovering over her glass as if it might offer her some protection from the words she had just heard. I didn't know," she stammered, though the disbelief lingered in her eyes. I thought." "You thought what?" I asked quietly, leaning back just slightly, letting the gravity of the revelation settle fully. "That I wasn't capable, that I didn't work hard, that I didn't deserve recognition. The table remained silent. Their laughter from earlier had vanished completely, replaced with stunned comprehension. My brother's jaw tightened, and for the first time I saw uncertainty in his eyes. The effortless charm, the carefree confidence, all of it had been a carefully maintained illusion. And now, the truth had cracked it open. "I've carried this secret because I didn't need praise," I said, my voice softening slightly. "I did it for family. But tonight, when I was humiliated for not having what my brother has, I realized it's time the truth came out. The truth isn't just about a penthouse. It's about respect, honesty, and the recognition that achievements aren't always what they seem." The table stayed frozen. My mother, finally regaining a semblance of composure, sank back in her chair, her eyes avoiding mine. My brother remained silent, his earlier amusement replaced by a mixture of anger and disbelief. And for the first time that evening, I felt light, almost weightless, as if the years of unacknowledged effort had finally been vindicated. No one laughed, no one interrupted. The power had shifted, quietly, irrevocably, and in that silence I knew that my secret, my truth, had delivered a justice sweeter than any revenge I could have imagined. The silence at the table felt heavier than any laughter had, yet somehow it was cleansing. My mother stared down at her untouched plate, her fingers clutching her fork as if it might anchor her in reality. My brother remained rigid, eyes darting to mine and then away, searching for some explanation, some excuse, anything to reclaim the confidence that had been stripped from him. But there was none to give. The truth had been revealed, and it was undeniable. I leaned back slightly, letting my shoulders relax. I had expected some immediate confrontation, some sharp retort from either of them, but instead, there was only the weight of realization settling across the table. The family who had mocked me, laughed at me, and reduced me to insignificance was now faced with a truth they couldn't ignore. I had been the quiet force behind what they all admired. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. I could see the mixture of shock, regret, and embarrassment flickering in her eyes. For years, she had measured my worth by the visible success of others, ignoring the quiet efforts I had made, the sacrifices no one else had noticed. And now, her assumptions were shattered, replaced by an uncomfortable clarity she couldn't escape. My brother, for once, seemed stripped of his armor. His usual easy charm, the confidence that had made everyone else look small, was gone. I could see the tension in his jaw, the slight tremor in his hands as he processed the truth. He had relied on appearances, on the admiration of others, never realizing, or perhaps never caring, that the foundation of his lifestyle was my labor and foresight. For a moment, I allowed myself a private, almost imperceptible smile. This wasn't cruel. It wasn't meant to humiliate beyond what was deserved. It was validation. It was acknowledgement that I had endured humiliation, doubt, and comparison, yet had quietly held the strings that had shaped their perception of success. There was a satisfaction here that went far beyond pride. It was the quiet triumph of patience, perseverance, and integrity. I picked up my glass, swirling the wine slowly as I considered the years of sacrifice. The long nights I had spent balancing budgets, negotiating leases, and ensuring everything ran smoothly, all while remaining in the shadows, had been worth it, not for recognition, but for the quiet power of truth. And now, for the first time, that truth had spoken on its own, louder than any boast or brag could have. "You see," I said softly, my voice steady, "true success isn't always visible. It's not about the penthouse, the parties, or the admiration of others. It's about the work, the patience, and sometimes the sacrifices no one notices." I just never thought I'd have to prove that at a dinner table. The words hung in the air, gentle but undeniable. My mother finally spoke, her voice low and uncertain. I didn't realize. But there was no recovery in her tone, no clever deflection. Only the acknowledgement that she had misjudged me. My brother stayed silent, his eyes meeting mine briefly. There was no apology, no excuse, only the subtle recognition that the balance of power had shifted. The golden boy of the family, so long untouchable, had been quietly outmaneuvered, not through confrontation, not through anger, but through the quiet revelation of truth. I set my glass down, feeling lighter than I had in years. The dinner could have continued in awkward silence, but I realized it didn't matter. The lesson had been delivered, the justice quietly administered. I didn't need to gloat, didn't need to explain further. My dignity, my patience, and my truth were enough. And as I finally allowed myself to breathe, I understood something vital. The sweetest revenge isn't anger or malice. It's living with grace, letting the truth reveal itself at the perfect moment, and knowing that years of quiet effort and integrity cannot be erased by laughter or scorn. Tonight, the table had gone silent, but in that silence I had won far more than any confrontation could have offered. I smiled to myself, rising from the chair with calm assurance. The world, my family, and even my brother's illusions could adjust to this new truth on their own. I had spoken once, and that was enough. The night was mine, quietly, irreversibly, and perfectly.